Welcome and thank you for standing by. You are currently connected to the live Q&A session on the AEF filing validation hosted by Titanium Technologies. At this time, all participants are on listen-only mode. Questions will be taken throughout the session. To raise a question, please utilize the Q&A link shown at the top portion of the slideshow. Type in your question and click on Submit. I'll also be sending the link in the chat box below. This call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this point. As we have shipped our enhancement on the AEF filing validation a month ago, we understand that there's been a major shift in user experience and expectations. It's a design improvement that upgrades the manner in which filed AEFs are checked and validated before they are routed to the approvers. This session aims to help you understand what's been upgraded as we share the before and after states of the AEF filing validation process, system notifications, reasons for being system disapproved, and of course, answers to your questions. My name is Jubel from Customer Experience, who will be moderating this session. We'd like to acknowledge the presence of our COO, Lanny Lacson, and our Chief Product Officer, Mean Garces. Today's speaker is no other than our founder and CEO, Jerry King. So let's start. Jerry, this is for the AEF filing validation.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's quick Q&A session. I promise that we will be finished or done in 28 minutes. As a quick backgrounder, myself and our company CTO, Alan, decided to make a major engineering change in how the system validates AEF forms, or what we call attendance exception forms. These validation includes or seeks to filter forms that were filed but would eventually be invalidated anyway because of other circumstances or other reasons. Now, just as a quick history, my HR is our third generation system. Previously, we were running a system called ePayroll. That's our second generation system. And in that second generation system, we have traditionally just simply allowed employees to file their forms. And then during the timekeeping run, the timekeeping will validate and decide whether those forms will be honored, processed, or not. So this way, there is no blocking in terms of filing. So, when an employee intends to file, let him file. And then whether what he has filed is valid based on business rules and company policies, we determine that during timekeeping. However, in version 3, we decided that we'll move some of the validation up front so that we can set or manage employee expectations early on. So there are things that we added so that upon filing, validation can be applied, and then when it can be decided, we can block the filing of the form in real time. One example of this is filing of leave forms without balances. So it used to be that they can file. We assume that they know if they have balances or not. And then upon timekeeping, upon the processing of attendance, we then determine that, okay, this leave file is invalid because there's no more leave balance. With version 3, with my HR, we now block the leave filing in advance so that, upon filing, the employee already know he doesn't have any more balances, so that that leave will not go through. He has to figure out some other way to achieve his goal. So, however, over time, over the last 5 years, more and more customers have added and requested more business rules to be added. We have features like EL, charge to VL. We also have features like an employee must use up VL first before he can use SL, or he can use SL first before he use VL. We also have validation like leaves cannot be filed on rest days for obvious reasons, and so on and so forth. So over the years, as we grow our customer base, we added more and more validation to the front-end facility, to the web application. And that has since resulted in the front-end engine being overwhelmed with very deep and very complex rules validation. No? So remember, our front end is a browser. So the browser could be on a cell phone, the browser could be on a desktop, it could be a new machine, could be an old machine. So by and large, the browser is very dependent on how good your machine is, because that's where all the logic is running. And also in the back end, how deep and how long it takes to complete the validation, that dictates then how quickly our system responds to the employee. So obviously, as we layer more and more business validation, things will start slowing down. While at the same time, more and more new clients are coming on board, and they seek even more and more intelligent validation. So because of this ever-growing or ever-increasing complexity in front-end validation, myself and my CTO, the company CTO, decided to move that validation from the front end to the back end. No? So that way, you can file, the system will accept it, there's no delay, there's no drama, no nothing, we'll take it. No? And then we'll run a validation and then inform the employee whether it is approved or disapproved and for what reason, before that form is actually forwarded to the approving officer to approve. Okay? So business rule validation muna bago approval. As a history, it used to be accept muna the form, have it approved, then do a business validation in timekeeping. Okay? Now, this change was done for good reason, but I believe that after I reviewed all the tickets that you all submitted, we realized that we missed how this changes your employees, the user, interacts with the system. The behavior of how the system reacts and how the employee reacts to that reaction change drastically from when we change from front-end validation, which appears on your screen now on the left side, to a split between some validation in the front end and some validation in the back end. No? So that's a change. That's the before and after. No? So what we didn't realize that we were focused on the technology, we were focused on the validation, the business rules, but we failed to anticipate how the action-reaction process or how the action-reaction sequence has now changed, and which now requires deeper understanding in order that we tweak or we implement this change better. Okay, so as you can see on this screen, so that's the gist of my announcement. That's the gist of this session. So what I'd like to share to you on screen is that it used to be on the front end, which is the browser. These are all the validation that is done. No, for OT, it checks if you're eligible. It checks if you are allowed if you're within the certain OT budget for the cutoff. For leaves, it checks how many leaves you can use. It checks whether the leave matches your schedule, whether it's a regular day or a rest day. It checks if there's a change of schedule. There are clients with half days, and there are clients with 8-hour days and 9-hour days. So there's all sorts of validation going on. But whether you use it or not, whether your company uses or not, that validation is there, and it applies to all employees, all users. So we felt that we have to improve the speed of the system response, and therefore we split the validation. Refer to the right side of the screen, the after section. We left some in the front end, and then we moved a lot of it to the back end. And then by back end validation, it means that employee can file, the system will take it regardless of whether they comply with certain business rules or business requirements. And then a few seconds later, a back-end server will process that form, check for all these validation that are highlighted. No? And then the system will send an email back to the employee. Of course, not everybody would be happy with that kind of setup, because obviously people would rather file and forget. No? If it's not allowed, then tell me right away. So we are sharing this information for your appreciation, and more importantly, to field any questions that you have, and then also perhaps identify some things that either we return back to front end, or identify some things that perhaps we should totally eliminate and not validate anymore, no? Meaning to say, hayaan natin i-file. And then kung walang balance, edi pag timekeeping, then it's absent, di ba? I mean, the employee should know that he has no balance. No? We don't have to let him know. I mean, it's his job perhaps to know because there's a leave balance screen on the system. Anyway, no? So that's an example, but not something that we have decided to do. And so at the end of this session, at the end of this Q&A, we'd like to have a better understanding and appreciation from you as our customers to determine how strict, how smart, how less smart, how forgiving, how unforgiving the system should be, just so that it's so that the system is easier to use by our employees who may or may not know all of these validation in the first place. Diba? All right. So and then from there, we will craft a subsequent updates to our system. By no means that this update is final. It's an ongoing improvement. The overall goal is to improve system responsiveness and response time, but also, of course, consider all the business rules that you seek to apply in the system. And the business rules, I think the validation can happen still in 3 places. Some would be in the front end during filing, some during what we call a back-end processing, or asymmetric validation. So meaning, i-file mo muna, we'll validate, and we'll give you feedback eventually a few minutes later. No? And then, of course, there's a final validation during timekeeping. There are certain absolute business rules that we need to apply during processing, okay? Because during processing, at the end of the day, we do your timekeeping every day. It is during processing that we are able to see with finality all the information that is available in the system. For example, may filed leave, may approval na ba o wala? Check the schedule. Is it a day off or is it not? And then what kind of schedule is it for the day? Is it a 4-hour day? Is it a 8-hour day? Is it a 9-hour day? So a lot of these rules are only available when you do the final attendance. All the rules, all the logic, all the parameters. No? So at the end of the day, there will be 3 places where we do validation. And the purpose of this session is to better understand your needs and then I guess, a more intentional, more intelligent decision on or more judicious choice into where to put the appropriate validation so that we can somewhat better control the action and reaction from the employee, from the approver, from the scheduler, and your business rules, and of course, the system. All right. So with that said, that's all from me today. I'll respond to any Q&A and I'll return the table back to Jobel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry, for that. I've shared in the chat box the link for any questions that our participants have in mind. And I'm going to share this next slide. We're taking an example. So one of the AEF types is leave of absence or LOA. And our data validation is primarily, of course, checking if the filed form conforms with the system requirements. And the validation includes asking questions: does the filed form have any duplicates? Has the user reached the maximum limit for filing forms? And does the filed form comply with the filing rules? So let's take a look at some of the examples of these filed LOAs, and let's see whether the validation that happened is truly valid and correct, and what was the reason for the system disapproval. So let me go ahead and go into the next slide. So these are the prompt messages on system disapproval, just to give our participants that overview of what messages appear on their end, or the notifications that appear on the user's end when these validations happen, when the basic and the customized validation happen on the system. So we have, based on the first slide slide that was shared earlier, we have the basic validation, such as the effective date should be less than the separation date, with pay frequency set up. And we also have the effective date greater than the hire date. These are the basic validations that happen in the front end. And we also have their corresponding validation messages. And for the customized validation, those that happen in the back end, we have them here. So let's taking, for example, LOA, we have the leave validation conditions such as maximum usage, master schedule, consume first, leave on non-regular day, CWS with different hours per day, no balance, eligibility date. These are the conditions that are applied when we are filing the LOA. And corresponding to these conditions, we have the notifications or prompt messages on system disapproval, as you can see on the rightmost part of your screen. So we have, for our first case, we have the no balance. For this employee, he filed a LOA on July 14th. And this was system disapproved. Right away, it was system disapproved. Jerry, based on this, I'd like Jerry to have a take on this first case. So this is a case of no balance. We found out that the employee has no EL balance. And the balance was actually uploaded July 22nd.
For this particular case, I believe that we should move the no balance check to the front end rather than allow the employee to file and then reject it after, because that already sets up the employee for, I guess, disappointment. No, despite the fact that I believe an employee should know first if there's a balance before he files. So what I'm seeing now is employees are filing regardless and then letting the system decide if there's a balance or not. So in this particular case, I think I'm amenable to moving the balance check to the front end, but it would be a simplistic check. It would only apply to employees who have totally zero balance, regardless of other combination of rules. When we check ledger for balance, there's a very deep set of rules that we have to consider. It might be a leave that is future dated. It might be leave that was retracted. It might be a leave on a regular day, or when they filed the leave, but somebody updated the schedule to become an off day. So there's a lot of combination of rules that we check in order to provide 100% confidence level that the balance that the leave filed must be accepted or denied. No, so we carry or we shoulder that responsibility. But given this, I think that we can identify a subset of employees that are totally zero balance regardless. So there would be a simplistic balance check rule that I will retain in the front end. However, if the same employee passes that simplistic rule and the leave does go through, the leave file does go through, there will still be another backend check. And it is also possible that that leave that went through might still be rejected. But we will do our best to already decline or deny employees who have, absolutely zero balance, especially when it's towards the end of the year already. So my answer here is I will move some checking in front, hopefully to deny majority who have zero balance, but we will still do some final check on a deeper level whether a particular leave that was filed is truly allowable or not allowable.
Thanks, Jerry, for that. So that's our first case. Let's go to the second case. This is for the existing LOA within date range. So there's an existing LOA within that date range that another LOA was filed. As you can see, top right of the screen, we have the LWOP filed for July 16 to 18th. And another LWOP filed for July 18. So for the second AEF, it was automatically system disapproved because there's an overlap. What do you think of this, Jerry?
Okay, I think this is where I realized beyond just simply validation, we have to also consider action reaction. No, in the old behavior, if we were to decline or deny the filing of leave of absence in the front end, and then given that there's already another form with a wide date range in the system, I think it would then prompt the user to modify how he files the form, no? Meaning to say, dati kasi our leave filing, our forms filing is single set, no, per day. So you can file a Monday, a Tuesday, skip a Wednesday, and go Thursday and Friday. But now we allow filing of entire date ranges. Employees may have become a bit more lax or a little bit less intentioned when they're filing. So they'll just go file 10-day range, knowing that the system would automatically skip the rest days, the Saturdays and the Sundays, no? Because the system is designed to do that. But now that we move the checking to the back end, the system or the customer or the employee will still file in a date range. However, we will decline the entire filing, even though if only one day has an issue. No, in this case, it's a 3-day thing, but there's another form that's in between. No, so for me, this is a little bit tricky. This is an example of where simply moving the validation from the front end to the back end, whereas the rules are still the same, the rules are still correct, the validation, the technical basis for the validation is still correct, but however, how the user perceives, how the user reacts to how the system reacts has now totally changed. So this is an example of we have to study whether in this case, maybe I should remove the validation now. No, I mean, I can still move it to the front, but if it proves to be, slow down the system, then I'll retain it in the back. But I also know that during timekeeping, we have a final validation that we do. So this is an example of, because we move it to the back, then we have to reconsider whether this validation is still required. Is it still needed? Is still valid? No. So I have no specific answer here, but I'd like to share lang my thought process. That then this is not a done deal. We have to put in more thought into this process, into this particular scenario.
Thanks, Jerry, for the insight. That's well noted. Let's go to the third case. This one was actually filed LOA on a non-regular day, and this is considered as one of our leave validation conditions. So it was filed last July 9th, and July 9th was tagged as a legal holiday. And that triggered for the AEF to be system disapproved.
Okay, so the background here is that originally the system will already block, right? So the system will say, do not file this, or you can't file this. Why the heck are you filing a leave when it is in fact a holiday, right? So in this case, the employee probably didn't realize that. He filed it nevertheless. Then the system checked why he is filing a form. And then the system will, decline it. Perhaps it didn't give the proper message, or give the proper context what he was denied. Maybe the employee thinks the supervisor denied it, no? So it creates all sorts of tension between the employee and his supervisor. But I also do know that when we do a timekeeping run, we do ignore leaves that were filed and approved that are dated on holidays, no? So meaning to say, even if we don't validate this, even if we allow this, the system will still process his attendance correctly. No, this is an example where I can have the team remove the validation. Total, I know naman sa timekeeping, we will validate it. But I would also like to note that in this case, it was a legal holiday, so that's kind of final, diba? I mean, legal holidays are specific. It's nationwide. However, if it were a rest day, the system would still behave accordingly. It will still decline or deny or disapprove the form because why are you filing a leave on a rest day? However, I know for a fact that that rest day may change, diba? Because there's another player in the process, which is the scheduler. The scheduler may have just been may just have not updated the schedule yet, and that could still well change. No, that day, rest day on July 9 can still become a regular day. No, so then this is what I meant by action reaction. No, so originally the employee, when he files a leave and it's a rest day, it will be declined, and he'll probably remember that, and then when the scheduler changed the schedule, then he would probably come back to file it again. No, so may prompt siya. No. However, given the change in the workflow, he would file it, he will get denied, you don't know why, and then only to realize perhaps that the schedule has not been updated. But if the schedule has been updated in the first place before he filed it, then this could have been accepted and there would have been no issue at all. No? So this is the part where I have to admit we failed to anticipate that beyond simple business rules validation, we also have to consider chronological sequence of things, of when the filing was done, when the approval is done, when system updates are made, when all the other players, put into context. So, I mean, puts this entire set of data into a set of correctly filed forms so that it is computed correctly. So with that said, I think that we have to rethink now the entire system, no? And we're open to whether that's a good idea or not. Again, context, previous version, we just file, and then we validate during timekeeping. Current version is we block in the front, we validate in the back, but the front is becoming front heavy, slowing down the system. So then this new release is we reduce the front, we added the middle layer checking before a final timekeeping checking. Now, if we are to continue and proceed down this path, then it also might mean that we will restrict certain options, meaning to say, for example, if you're on leave, maybe we will restrict you from filing an OT on the day that you're on leave. It used to be we allow that, and then we let the timekeeping decide whether that makes sense or not. If, for example, you are a new hire, and then the leave module has not initiated your leave balances yet, we will not let you file. No, so baka we will move on towards a more restrictive filing with a required sequence. But of course, that's very dangerous because when an employee goes online, we don't know what he wants to do. He's gonna file ba a leave muna for December before he files a leave for June. Diba, mauna yung kasal niya in December, fa-file niya ngayon before he decides na, this June he's also going to attend his, to attend to a personal leave, no? But that already sets aside the, leave balances, no? So that complicates all this checking that we're talking about. So yun, that's where we are, no? So case number 3 might trigger a further change in system behavior. We may like it, we may not like it. It is something that we will study deeply, but this time we will involve all customers in order that we have a better understanding of how the employees are filing. Ideally kasi sana, employees file every day, files in the correct sequence. They don't jump around different days. They don't file after the fact. They don't change their mind. Schedules are set ahead of time, beginning of the cutoff. You don't set schedules at the end of the cutoff. Ideally, there's a certain sequence, a certain chronological sequence on all the forms, then it's easier to do the validation. But since we want to do both strict validation and allow free-for-all flexibility in filing, regardless of when, and I think that's a crossroads of that is where, I mean, that combination is what is giving us this problem, plus our goal of making the system faster and more responsive. That's basically where we are. And I apologize as CEO that this did not become clear to us sooner, and it only became clear to us after we released it to several thousand employees, users in the system.
Thank you, Jerry, for the answer and for the insights. Very duly noted. We do have we're at the bottom of the hour now, and we're going into the questions posted in the link slides.app.google/U6SH3. So if you have your browser, you can go into that link and submit your question. We have a question from Sandra.
Joel, in the interest of time, since we promised to finish in 30 minutes, let's answer a few questions. And then after that, whatever questions come in for the rest of the day, let's do a written response and email everyone a copy.
Sure.
Thanks.
That's what we're going to do. Thanks, Jerry. We have a question from Sandra. She said, before, the system is not accepting any filed leave if the day type is rest or leg. Your comment?
Yes, that is correct. We used to reject this. We are still rejecting it, except that we are rejecting this after filing. No, so the employee will file today, and then a few seconds later, the system will run the validation and tell the employee, sorry, this leave is declined because it's your rest day, it's your legal holiday. There's no sense to file a leave on such days, and that's done. So that's what's changed. I mean, the validation is still the same. It's just whether how much we accept, how much we let through during filing, so that the front end system does not slow down and pass on some of the work to a after the fact validation and checking. No, again, the reason we did that is to manage more workload. No, kasi kung lahat nasa front, if we have 20,000 users simultaneously filing at the end of the cutoff, then our servers will slow down. So we aim to reduce that load in front because the back end is infinitely more capable. The back end can process, for example, 200,000 forms filed at the same time and do all the very complex validation. But the front end may be just limited to 10,000 at the same time. So that's what it's an engineering consideration. But the business rule here is still the same. We decline in the front end. This is a relatively simple checking, except that when we add 50 other checking, then the entire system slows down. And then we have to now decide out of the 50 that we check in the front end, which 10 do we retain in front and which 45 do we put in the back, or which 45 do we modify because the behavior is now different. That's where we are today.
Thanks for the comment, Jerry. And thanks for the question, Sandra. That's a great question. We have another question on queue. How will an employee know the reason behind for the system disapproved status? Upon checking the AEF inventory, no reasons can be found.
This is an oversight from our side. We know the reason. But apparently we overlook that in terms of the customer experience, when we update the record, when we send back that email, there should be a clear and very concise and very detailed reason of why the form was disapproved. Yes, the employee should be able to see it either on screen, on the attendance screen. There's a section where you see all the forms that are filed and why it was the status, whether it was approved or disapproved. What we failed to add was the reason, and then also in the email. So we'll add that for sure in the next release.
Thanks, Jerry. And that answers that next question that we have on queue. Is there any way that my HR can notify and provide reason to employee for the system disapproval? Yes, same answer.
Same answer. So we need to roll this out quickly, Jabel. I mean, this can't wait because we don't want our HR partners to be overwhelmed with questions and concerns and issues, especially their supervisors.
Thanks, Jerry. Definitely. Let's go to the last question we have on queue. Oh, second to the last question. We have here regarding the first case that we have, since it was mentioned to put the validation back to front end, when will that be effective?
As soon as possible, Jabel. We can either put back the simplistic checking or we can show the leave balance right on the screen where they're filing their form, so that they'll see a 0. Don't even attempt, don't even try. So immediately, yeah, I think this is the most common concern. Employees are filing without being aware of their balance. So they're letting the system tell you, wala ka ng balance, wag ka na mag-file, rather than check first, verify. So, that's a surprising behavior that I only realized today. But we'll put that back right away. Yes, wait, go.
Thanks for the response, Jerry. We have one more on queue. How long does it take for that validation to go through, or for the
It could
status
be
to
as
be
quick
on?
as 1 second, in 1
Mhm.
second, or it can be as quickly after a few minutes. The idea that we do asymmetric is that it's like a queue. So it's like the order counter of Jollibee. On a slow day, you might have 2 cashiers open and you might allow 5 people to wait. On a busy day, you might have 10 counters open and you only allow 3 people to wait. So the system will take as long as take as short a time as possible in order for the employee to know right away. But also, of course, I appreciate the fact that iba yung while you're filing, sinasabihan ka na versus nag-file ka, you logged out, and then you'll get a response via email. So I think we will be also judicious where the kind of form requires immediate feedback, dapat front end na, like 0 leave balance. And for those forms that I must know quickly, okay, versus those that it's okay if I know within the day, because for example, if I file a leave form for 3 months from now, I don't have to know the next second. I mean, knowing at the end of the day is okay. So I think a bit of balance. I meaning to say I cannot commit that everything is 3 seconds. No, then that kind of defeats the purpose of what we call asymmetric checking. There is a queuing that's going to happen, and then we have to apply judiciously which is processed first and which must respond quickly and which must respond slower. So yes, we'll do that. But the short answer to this, dapat as soon as possible, so that the employee knows what he needs to do.
The short answer is to come with me.
Got it. Thank you. And thanks for the individual who raised this question. Such a great question there. We have another question from Sandra. Currently, employees are immediately aware of an error. If we're going to move the validation to the back end, it will cause a delay, especially if we have a rule regarding filing VL. Example, VL should be approved 3 days before the intended date. How can we address this?
I mean, as a CEO, I'll say, you're an employee, you should know the rules. You came into the way, this is a policy. For me, this is not an error. Malinaw naman sa policy 3 days before. So if it got denied, then, don't cry. Don't cry because policy to eh, di ba? But that's me talking as CEO, di ba? Sumunod kayo sa rules. But as HR, we're a bit softer. We have to take care of our people. We have to be a bit more sensitive with, how they think, how they react. I guess we'll kind of have to put into a vote. If I have only room for 10 rows in the front and I have to leave 40 rows in the back, I have to get everyone's feedback, siguro, what we retain in the front. Maybe this one is prescribed filing. Maybe we can retain it in the front if it's not very critical in terms of the system load. We'll put it in the front. But I think that's what we need to do, Jabel. We need to understand what are critical, no negotiations to be in the front, and then what can be in the back. No. So in this case, this is you cannot file unless you're filing 3 days in advance or earlier. No, I think I understand the point. The point here is that basta hindi pwede tapos. No, and then if you allow it and then decline it, then the kind of changes the dynamics of or the expectation of the employee. So I think we need to identify that what filing we need to leave in the front because the employee just cannot handle the rejection. So that thinking that we have to apply. We'll do that.
Thanks, Jerry, for the feedback. And thanks, Sandra, for that question. We have two other questions on queue, the last two questions. We have from Solana, HR Solana asked, is it normal for the system to experience system lag when an approver has a large form for approval? I think
Yes,
she's referring to the count.
Okay, I think let me just clarify. It is not so much system lag when a approver has a large form, as stated here, large number of forms for approval. What your browser is doing, you're using Chrome, you're using Safari, you're using Microsoft Edge. We're downloading a text file from our servers with the list of the forms. No, you're downloading a text file. And then that text file has to be reconstituted, or it has to be displayed on screen. It has to be rendered, is what it's called. Kailangan i-drawing ng browser mo on screen the data that was downloaded. And that's where the lag is coming from. There's just too much data to load on the browser. Remember, browsers are designed to be, in technical terms, thin clients, no? Light load. Huwag mo ikarga yung mga hindi mo kailangan, because the internet connectivity could be dial-up, could be fiber. Well, sorry, nobody uses dial-up. Could be fiber, could be cellular, could be 2G, 3G, we don't know. So we try to load as little as possible. But what we cannot control, of course, are approvers who do not approve regularly. So iniipon po till the end of the cutoff. So I have seen approvers approve 600 forms in one go. I say that's ridiculous. How can you approve 600 forms in one go without going through them one-on-one? No. So I feel that personally, as a systems implementer, as a payroll solutions provider, you should not overload your approvers. You should not give him more than 20, 30 employees. Or you should not assign 2 or 3 levels of approvers, such that you create a triangle where you have 20 approvers in the third level, 10 approvers in the second, and there's 1 approver on top. And then obviously all the forms will go to him, and then he will just be overwhelmed with 600 forms. And I believe that if I have to approve 600 forms, I probably would not go through them one by one anymore. Now I'll just say approve all. Then that kind of defeats the purpose of his approval. And I think that in the context of my HR, you should only have 1 approver, the direct supervisor, because the direct supervisor would know what his guy is doing. And I seriously challenge and doubt if the second or third approver knows what that guy is doing. But I probably understand where this came from, because dati, kung papel tayo, parang gobyerno, 10 tao magsasign kasi, everybody must have joint accountability. But I think that in the modern way of doing payroll, we should only have 1 level of approver. And then the second and third can just probably sign off after the fact, maybe end of cutoff, end of the month, you print a report, you have them review, you have them sign. That, I think, is where their approval comes in, or rather an acknowledgement comes in that they know, but rather than approval. So having said that, when you say large form approval, so it's either naipon yung forms, or sobrang dami yung empleyado na naka-assign sa kanya, or nandun siya sa second or third level, then na funnel na sa kanya lahat, then talagang sobrang bagal na. There's nothing we can do, I think, because there's just too much data. No, it's parang, we watch Netflix, we watch ganyan, so the system lags kasi maraming data. That's only reason when you lag. There's large amount of forms. So I think we should look into how can we reduce the forms. I think that's where the solution is. So Jobel, I don't know who this person or this company is. Maybe we should reach out and then have a bit better understanding of what causes the large number of forms, and then recommend some action to be taken. I think that we should eliminate the situation where there's the large number of forms, so to speak, if possible. Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. The last question on queue we have here You mentioned that the front-end validation causes an overload in the server. Do you have any other solution to address this server issue rather than implement drastic changes in the workflow?
This is not a server issue, actually. This is a response time issue. We can keep upgrading the servers. We can spend millions on the servers. But I think what I'm saying here is that there's a reasonable amount of rules lang that you can implement in the front end. Yes, it is drastic, but I also call it evolutionary and progress. No, and what we must do, of course, is to reduce the drasticness. We must roll it out slowly. I get that, I understand, and I apologize that the change was drastic and sudden. We will also look at the server side to see if there's anything we can do there, but it's not so much whether the server is fast or slow. I mean, for us, kung server lang issue, mas mabilis siya i-upgrade kasi pera lang kailangan, bayaran mo lang, upgraded na yung server. So it's not that. We have reached a point where no amount of money will improve the server because the rules are complex. So which means that to a point, to a certain, it will reach a point where pag file ko ng form, maghihintay ka ng 20 seconds bago ma-validate, then you file another form, then another wait 20 seconds. No? So kasi malalim yung checking po talaga and marami pong data binibuksan. But point taken, if there's any other solution that we can find that does not require a drastic change, or we can reduce the drasticness of the change. For example, earlier we moved the leave balance checking sa harap. We do gonna. I get it, no. I understand that if possible, HR should not have to deal with this, no. It's our problem, and I thank you for your candidness. I thank you for your sharing this thought today. Jobel, please take note of this. You know, can we look at another solution? We appreciate this. Thank you.
Yes, and at the same time, we're at the frontier of automation trends, the next generation automation trends in HRIS solutions or HR solutions. Last bit, I promised a while ago that was the last question, but we have just one last bit of question from HR Solana. She is asking, can the system adjust this CWS? As you can see on screen, we have the example provided. Can the system adjust that to the next cutoff if the employee refiled the CWS? She would just like to validate this scenario.
I have to hand it off to the team to define this. Did we block the filing of a second CWS? So this basically is a second CWS on an adjustment cutoff. Do we allow this or not?
That's something that we are going to
Yeah,
check.
I mean, we have to check with tech.
Definitely. So that
we'll respond this along offline, no, and then we'll send everyone a copy.
Okay.
We'll
Sure
double
do.
check. Sorry, I don't have the answer now. Sorry.
Sure.
I
do.
don't know.
Sure
I mean, the
do.
system should be able to accept. The system should be able to override a new CWS with another CWS. But I assume that the reason this was asked, maybe it was declined, it was not allowed. So if it were declined and not allowed, then we have to find out the why. And I think we must find out accurate and get the accurate answer and then respond in written form.
I have moved the question and question box to be closed, but there was just a question that remained in the queue. Jerry, would you want to take the last question on queue? It says here, can we request to put the change of request of rest day in AEF so the employees has the access to change their RD? I think that's a feature request already. What do you think, Jerry?
I think this is possible. Changing of rest day request by the employee, I think is possible. But I have to understand the context because we have different client profiles. We have clients who are very strict that every 7th day there must be a rest day. We also have a requirement where we have to make sure that there are no more than 52 rest days in a year. I mean, if we allow the employees to change their rest days, they may end up scheduling 70 rest days, and the managers wouldn't know better because they would just keep approving. We also have customers where they control their schedule. You know, the schedule is intentional. Perhaps it's a manufacturing facility, so there's a certain cadence, there's a certain pattern that they have to follow. So can we put the rest day filing in AEF? Yes, for sure. There's no reason why we cannot do that. We used to have that. Our challenge is when we allow the employee to file this, then that means there will be more validation when our rest day changes are allowed and not allowed. Customers will say, well, why did you allow him? It's now 60 rest days. Paano na? Ba't di nyo alam? Ba't di nyo chinek? So in any feature that we allow employees to do, there's always a whole busload, truckload of validation that we have to add. If it were simply filing, then that's okay. But as we have seen, some employees are opportunists. They will test the system. They will do this. They will do that. They'll file this. They'll file that. And as a provider, I'm trying not to be liable to things like, validation rules, policy. Alam niyo naman, hindi pwede kayo mag 70 rest days. Why did you do that? And it becomes my burden why I allowed it. So as a businessman and as a technical person, I'm trying to find the balance between liability, control, and system capability, flexibility. So I'm in that difficult situation where I have to balance all. So the short answer to this, yes, for sure. We can put whatever form, whatever change. But then the next question is, what are the control expectations? What are the validation expectations? Where would the validation be? Front end, middle, in the back? No. So, and I think that after 20 years in this business, we've accumulated a lot of checking and validation because the burden of checking has now been shifted to us, the provider. Our role is simply to calculate attendance and payroll, but now we have an added role of ensuring that the employee does not cheat the company. So now I wonder if we failed in that role, what are our business or risks or liability to you as a vendor? And sometimes when I think about it, I say, it's not worth the trouble, diba? So, but if I simply put on my technical hat, is this feature available? Yeah, for sure. No problem. Am I liable if I allowed it and he ended up with more rest days or less rest days? Kunyari, sa kakapalit niya, nalito siya, naging 40 rest days na lang siya for the year. What are my liability? What more reports do I need to add? What more feature do I need to give? So in that sense, parang mas naisip ko pa na, can the scheduling be done by the scheduler na lang? Mas responsible and intentional and more capable rather than letting the employee file nilly-nally and let the system figure out. So yun, that's where we are. That's my thoughts on the matter, but let's sit on it and let's discuss it. Let's schedule a discussion. Any one of you who needs the facility or capability to allow employees to request a change rest day or to file for a new rest day, I'm happy to jump into a Zoom so we can, change ideas, policy, risk, control, validation, flexibility, self-service. Let's do a discussion here, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry, for answering that last question. And as we move to the closing of today's session, I'm certain that our dear participants have their own takeaways from this live Q&A session. Definitely, this is a work in progress. My key takeaways, and I hope that you have these key takeaways on your list. There's a significant change in our user experience, and we have seen the frequent reasons for system disapproval. So what's next? Definitely, Titanium Technologies will continue to improve the user experience as we consider the reactions of the different roles. You'll be expecting us to have this kind of Q&A session, I think, in the next months. And of course, sharing with you the Zoom link of Jerry. So if you'd like to have a direct line with Jerry, have a sit down, a 15-minute power Zoom with him, take note of this link, calendly.com/Jerry Tiang/power-Zoom. Let me also type it in the chat box for everyone to take note of this link. You can schedule a call with him, a 15-minute power Zoom with Jerry, and he'd be more than happy to accommodate your questions and requests. And that's it for today. It's 11:55. Thank you all for participating. And we're looking forward to sharing our next enhancements with you. Have a good afternoon. Have a good day. Thank you, everyone.